Okay, well, welcome to International Women's Day March Forward webinar. I'm going to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia on which this webinar is hosted and viewed today, and we recognise the unique cultural and spiritual relationships of the land, waters and seas and their rich contribution to society. We pay our respects to ancestors and elders past, present and emerging. And I'm presenting today from Gadigal land, and I'm very grateful that I'm able to be here. As a binational colleges, we also acknowledge and respect the Ngāiwi Māori of the Tangata Whenua of Aotearoa, and we are committed to upholding the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, fostering the college's relationships with Māori, supporting Māori fellows and trainees, and striving to improve the health of Māori. We also send our best wishes to those in cyclone-affected areas who are likely to not be watching this in real time. This presentation will go on our websites for later viewing, and we really hope that those people are able to catch up when their lives go back to some kind of normalcy. So in celebrating International Women's Day for 2025, the Australian and New Zealand College of Anaesthetists, the Royal Australasian College of Physicians and the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons have joined forces and are hosting this 1-hour webinar as a collective initiative to march forward together. Whether you're joining us from your office or watching as part of a party and connecting with others in your hospitals and practices, we hope you get at least one thing from each of our amazing speakers. We apologise that the tight timeline means we can't do live question and answers, but the comments section is open. The membership team will be replying, and we really look forward to hearing any comments or questions that you'd like us to follow up on. So moving straight on, our first speaker is Associate Professor Kerin Fielding. She was the first female orthopaedic surgeon in New South Wales and has established a successful career in Wagga Wagga over the past 30 years, working at Wagga Wagga Base Hospital and Calvary Healthcare Riverina. She has special interests in surgery for hip, knee, spine and trauma surgery. She was elected to the Council of RACs in 2015, was made their president in 2023 and re-elected in 2024. She's a strong advocate for improvements in rural healthcare, has campaigned for better treatment of osteoporosis, chairing the Working Party for the establishment of an osteoporosis liaison service. She's a member of the National Scientific Committee for Osteoporosis Australia and is on the executive for the National Hip Fracture Registry. So we're incredibly grateful for her to have time today. Presenting on behalf of RACs, it's a pleasure to have her here to talk about how you have helped someone march forward.
Thank you, Claire. And we have a video that we've prepared at RACs to talk to you about our gender diversity plan, which I really wanted to start with to tell everybody how we're tracking with our training. So I'll get them to play that first, please. And it does have a bit of racy sound, but the sound's not working today. So this will just give you some pictures of our women in surgery and tell you a little bit about the numbers of women and how that's rapidly rising. Perhaps not as much as we'd like, but you will see how we're tracking. So certainly we have some specialties that are more popular than others for women, and I'm sure that's related to the culture. But it's hugely different from when I started training. As you said, I was the first female orthopaedic surgeon in New South Wales and equal second in Australia. And for many, many years, we were only a couple of %. So we're really making a huge change.
I love seeing the babies in the pictures.
I know, isn't that wonderful? They bring them along.
Yeah.
We're very good in surgery at using evidence to push our colleagues along the pathway. and I'll tell you a tiny bit about that in my speech. So our targets for 2027 have been 40%. We're not quite there, but we're very close. We're 32% this year. It just gives you an idea of where we're going. And 2027 is our 100-year anniversary. So we were really hoping to get to 40% by 2027. We have strong female leadership. We have 13 of our 33 council members are women, and we're going to have nearly 50% of our board, our new board that's just started, will be female. So our journey continues. Thank you. So the theme for International Women's Day this year is Accelerate Action and March Forward to promote gender equity and speed up progress. And in the current political climate of Trump, MAGA, and with a growing extreme right-wing narrative, we must celebrate the collective strength and influence of women who have dedicated their lives to education, mentorship, and leadership to promote gender equality, address systemic barriers, and elevate the women's voice. We must continue this work. We have many amazing role models in our profession. Throughout my career, I have been very involved in medical education across the spectrum of training, from medical school with my position at Notre Dame University. I have an academic position, and then right through to the post-fellowship space. I worked at HEDI, the Health Education and Training Institute, New South Wales, for 20 years, working in the pre-vocational space, looking after young doctors who are aspiring to surgery throughout all of the different specialties. It is imperative that young women can see what they can become, and they must have role models across the whole spectrum of the profession. I've had many trainees during my career, and it's difficult to give you one specific example, but can I say how important it is to work across the spectrum of training, because you will encounter junior doctors, medical students, even people in high school who come to do work experience in your practice, that will be inspired to follow your footsteps. I have trainees in the pre-vocational space at the moment. We were the first place in Australia to have 2 female orthopaedic surgeons in Wagga, with Dr. Angela Hatfield coming to work with me after I'd mentored her for many years. So a lot of our work is about the role modeling that we do in our profession, so that young doctors can follow in our footsteps. We must continue to dismantle the barriers of gender inequity and ensure equal opportunities for those women behind us. We need to step up and continue on our advocacy. It's very important to get leadership roles in our colleges, so that we can work on things like maternity leave, breastfeeding requirements, and all those issues that affect women specifically in our professions. Not only is our collective voice imperative to assist our juniors and achieve their dreams, but we need to think of the patients that we serve. We know from excellent international evidence that female patients have better outcomes when women are involved in their care and are their surgeons. There are many papers around the world now showing that women have better outcomes with female surgeons. We know that women consider domestic violence issues in the healthcare setting and have an advanced understanding of violence against women. We need women in departments to make these areas visible and understood. It is for these reasons that we must insist on diversity on our boards, councils, committees, at all of our educational meetings, in our universities and our hospital departments. We must be brave, we must speak out, and we need to support each other. We are heading in the right direction, but not fast enough. We now have 60% women graduating from our medical schools, and only 32% of our trainees in surgery are women. I think the anaesthetists are well ahead of us. I put it to you that we must bust the meritocracy debate and insist on quotas for the future. And that's what our leadership needs to do. We have had targets. 40% was our target by 2027, but we have not achieved this as we'd hoped. So I have put it to my college that we need to accelerate action, which is the theme of International Women's Day. Think big, talk loud, be brave and insist on gender equity. I certainly will be. I have many junior doctors that I mentor. It's been a tough road being the first female orthopod in New South Wales and the equal second in Australia, but I've now found my voice. So join me and together we can change our world. We need to support our junior doctors, support the school leaver, which I know is something that Claire wants to talk about later. And I don't think gender is an issue, but we do need to help those coming behind us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I love your mention of meritocracy. I was lucky enough to hear Cara Swisher recently, and she says the meritocracy is just the mirrorocracy.
That's
how you should think about it whenever you're trying to argue on merit. And I think that that's a really interesting thing to consider moving forward, given that so many people applying for our positions clearly meet all of the standards. I always say I would never on anaesthetic training these days. They're all exemplary applicants.
Yes.
And thinking about how we do that selection is really interesting going forward.
Well, when we look at the results for getting into medical school in the first place, you know, we're still looking at that cream of the crop across the country. And so it's quite ridiculous, this whole meritocracy debate. You know, we are looking at, you know, the most capable, intelligent, you know, well-rounded young people in our society. And then we're saying they have to jump a whole lot more hurdles that are quite ridiculous. Why do you need to have a PhD to be a neurosurgeon? You know, they're not all academics. So yeah, we do need to bust the meritocracy debate.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving to our second speaker, Dr. Jacob Koshy. He's a consultant in anaesthesia and pain medicine and has worked at Alice Springs for the last 20 years. Jacob did his anaesthetic training in India and ANZCA fellowship in 2007. He's been the director of the department in Alice Springs since 2009. His special interest in pain medicine, airway management, emotionally intelligent leadership, and cross-cultural communication. He's also an avid badminton player. So as well as being the head of department, he's the president of the local badminton club. He loves cats, just like Taylor Swift. Presenting on behalf of ANZCA, we are delighted to hear what he has to say about why it's important for everyone to be part of marching forward.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone. I am currently speaking from the beautiful state of Rajasthan in India, where my wife and I are having a little bit of a holiday. And but before I start, I just want to acknowledge that the land I live and work on is the land of the Aranda people. It's a land of people who have thrived and flourished in an environment that has been arid and one of the most difficult environments to live in, and yet over thousands of years they have continued to flourish and thrive. And I have raised my family, my 2 sons there, and we have loved living there and engaging with the local indigenous people there. So it's been an honor and privilege over these years living in Alice. I'm starting with with this picture that hangs very proudly. It's a painting that hangs very proudly as you enter our operating theaters. And this picture tells us a story. It tells us the story of the operating theater, where patients and staff come from many places. And they come, so the red color in the center represents people, the desert colors of the center. And people who come from different areas, including from the coastal areas, are represented by the bluish tinge on the outer periphery. This painting was done by one of our traditional owners, who also happens to be an Aboriginal liaison officer, Mr. Curtis Haynes. The 5 circles you see in the middle represent our operating theaters. The 2 groups of people who you will see as semicircles, 6 semicircles on either side of the large, big circle, they represent patients in the waiting area, recovery room, both before and after the operation, and also the 2 small circles that you will see around with the 3 semicircles. This show people in clinic appointments, meeting between patients, and the 3rd person in that might be an ALO, who is the Aboriginal liaison officer, or an interpreter, or a family member. The big black line that you see going through the center depicts the many paths patients travel to reach us. And this may be just a couple of blocks away in town, or days of traveling, sometimes alone, sometimes with family, on an ambulance, or even on a flight with the RFDS to get to us. So we believe that this shows us that the operating theatres are a vibrant, it's a diverse place that offers a nurturing and a caring environment for all who need our services. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is where I live and work, an absolutely stunning place. It's the Alice Springs Township, which is nestled among the West McDonald Ranges that you can see in the foreground. And in the foreground also is a little gap, if you can see that gap between the ranges that leads out of the town along the North Stewart Highway or South Stewart Highway towards Adelaide. But that gap also is significant in representing another gap. The next slide, please. It's a gap that we have been talking about for many, many decades now. It's a gap that helps us think about how we address the issues of inequality with health and other issues with Indigenous people compared to the rest of Australia. And it's a gap that, even though we've been trying to close, continues to elude us in terms of how far we've been able to close the gap. We are, however, I believe we are narrowing the gap, even though it's slowly. And there is so much work going into this particular space. Go to the next slide, please. There are a number of metrics that the federal government has been using to help reduce or narrow the gap. And a number of, and you will see those metrics there now on the screen. I want to focus particularly on the second one, which says increase employment and economic opportunities, as well as support the fourth one, which is support early years development and remove barriers to education and training. And you will see that the next slide will show us a few other metrics as well that the government is looking at. Can we go to the next slide, please? Where I live and work in the Northern Territory has Australia's highest proportion of Aboriginal people. And this is estimated at around 30% of the NT population. And the Northern Territory Public Service over the last 4 years, that is prior to 2015, we are talking about data from 2015, the selection rate for Aboriginal applicants was only 5.8% out of an estimated 30% of the NT population. Now, the reason I'm talking about how it is important for everyone to be marching forward is also so that we are understanding that we need this inclusivity that represents a significant proportion of our population. And to enhance the ability of the Northern Territory Public Service, the Commissioner for Public Employment has talked about a special measures plan. It's a plan called Special Measures, where agencies are encouraged to implement ways to facilitate the recruitment of suitable Aboriginal applicants by creating an opportunity for them to apply to specific quotas where we set aside places. And I think there was a little mention about that before. Next slide, please. I will talk a little bit more about that soon. It is important for everyone to be marching forward. And this is from the Prime Minister's report in 2018. The power of a job can be transformational through the provision of not only greater financial independence, but also skills and training that can open up future opportunities. Employment also contributes significantly to people's health, well-being, and social outcomes. This comes from the Closing the Gap report. And I think that encapsulates so powerfully the power of a job. I had the opportunity to see this firsthand in a person called John, who was one of our theatre technicians, worked for a number of years with us, and then sort of fell down a bit of a spiral went down a spiral and began abusing alcohol and eventually lost his job. When I next saw him, he was coming in as a patient to the operating theater. He needed to have an amputation, and he had basically lost all hope. And just in talking to him, I recognized this man who was a shadow of his former self. We worked on improving his health. He finally was discharged, and in conversations with another incredible man who works in Alice Springs, who is a double amputee and runs a very successful car hire business, and he has run this business by himself, driving his own cars, and even though he's a double amputee. And we talked about John getting employment with him, and he contacted John, said, look, I can drive a car without two legs. You have at least one. We can work on providing you with a car that you will be able to drive. And he was able to offer employment to John. The next time I saw John, which was another 6 months later, this man was completely different. He was beaming. He had a lot of, he almost as though his zest for life had come back, and just the ability for him to then start earning a living and not have to depend on other people just gave him a sense of pride. The power of a job can be truly transformational. Go to the next slide, please. When we talk about equity in employment opportunities, I want to talk a little bit from the Indian perspective and our story. So 75 years ago, there was a quota system or reservation system that was introduced. This was a constitutional mandate, hopefully meant to correct all these historical caste-based discriminations that had occurred over centuries, and which precluded people from tribes, castes, or backward classes that were considered backward or below the top castes being provided with opportunities for jobs or education. And so what was put forward was a relaxed merit requirement with fixed quotas to ensure that there was representation in areas like education, public sector jobs, and political representation. This has been going on for 75 years. How have we done? Now, this is called affirmative action in some places, and there is affirmative action in employment, which has also been trialed, surprisingly, in the USA, in Canada, and even in Malaysia. So next slide, please. What is the public perception? So there are a lot of naysayers, and there's a lot of criticism about this whole concept. But although from a social justice point of view, it was seen to have merit, but it was criticized by others for affecting meritocracy, as we alluded to before. Has it achieved what it was meant to? I believe it has. And speaking to friends who have lived and worked in so many sectors in India, we have people from all castes and tribes who have now progressed to a point where there's significant representation in so many areas in employment and in society and in other fields. We have had 3 presidents who've come from low caste backgrounds. And in fact, our current president is Mrs. Draupadi Murmu, who also is a woman who comes from a tribal background. This would have been impossible without some form of affirmative action. We go to the next slide, please. But I also want to talk about another incredible groundbreaking amendment. In 1993, the Panchayati Raj constitutional amendment was passed. And this was groundbreaking because it mandated the number of seats women could be elected to councils in villages, blocks, and districts. And it mandated the position of a village chief, that it had to be given to a woman. And here you have now female village chiefs who are now finding themselves in positions that were truly unimaginable just a generation before, wielding considerable power and being able to be responsible for making important decisions, such as the allocation of public finances. In 2010, a comprehensive study of village councils in 11 Indian states found that villages with female leaders made greater investments in key public services like drinking water, education, and roads. And overall, the study confirmed that quotas for women leaders had not only helped raise the profile of issues that the female electorate considered important, but also significantly improved service delivery in those areas. And in the same 11-state study, villages also reported, now listen to this, it's really funny, villages also reported paying fewer bribes in villages led by women. Incredible. Can we go to the next slide, please? So coming back to the NT public employment. So why do I talk about this? Because I think it's important for us to think about this issue and this concept. So special measures. The Northern Territory Public Service has an aspirational target to achieve 16% representation of Aboriginal employees within the NTPS and 10% of Aboriginal employees in senior management roles. It is a policy-driven approach to address underrepresentation of Indigenous people. There's target group, which of course are the Indigenous Australians, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Selection criteria. So I know that our Indian context was a bit different and there were relaxed merit requirements. However, with the special measures, it is merit-based, but with supportive measures to encourage applications, with implementation primarily in public sector jobs and government organizations. Next slide, please. Public perception has generally been positive to this, although there are challenges that exist around genuine inclusion and support. What are our results so far? We haven't reached 16% so far in the NTPS, but we are getting there, close to between 13 to 14% so far. So we're almost there. But the unexpected benefit is the gender prevalence that I see. So even just walking around the Alice Springs Hospital, in our administrative pool now of people who have joined through special measures, an overwhelming majority are young Aboriginal girls. And I think that is really such a wonderful thing to see. And although it was unexpected, I think this is the outcome that we are hoping for, that you will see people who generally in the past thought they couldn't, now being able to apply and getting jobs and doing such an incredible job. Next slide, please. So the special measures will continue to remain in place until equality of opportunity has been achieved. Once this target is achieved, I think special measures, I believe, will no longer be required. But it goes beyond hiring. We have to provide an environment where whoever joins, whether it's through special measures, whether it's people from other backgrounds, will still feel supported and nurtured. And that is what is going to ensure our long-term retention. So we are still not quite there, and I think that we have work to do in that space. Another interesting thing that I want to talk to you about is the NT Medical Program, which is set to start in 2026. It will be a standalone medical program that is Commonwealth supported, and they have something called the 40-40-10-10 innovation that they want to bring into this space, which is going to mean 40% of the applicants have to be Indigenous to the NT Medical Program, 40 have to be from a rural background, 10 will be open to any candidate, and 10 will be probably from international candidates. That's roughly what they are suggesting. They will have an innovative way of assessing eligibility, because so far we've always depended on things like the UCAT to assess eligibility. But is the UCAT a forum that allows everyone to have equal access to being eligible? The UCAT is unfortunately not an easy exam to get through, because and currently you have in a lot of coaching programs and a lot of things that are done now with which cause people to which cost a lot of money for people to join these programs that prepare you to enter the UCAT, and it's not a fair program that allows everyone to join. And so there will be innovative ways. I've been talking to the Vice Chancellor of that university, who thinks that they're going to work out ways of assessing eligibility that doesn't depend on something like the UCAT. Next slide, please. I want to tell you about Robert and Kerin. They are two people who work with us in the operating theatre. Robert is one of our theatre techs, and Kerin is one of our admin people who works in the theatre as well. Robert comes from, he finished his year 12, grew up, he's a full-blooded Aranda man, grew up in Alice Springs, went to high school here, and then as a result of special measures, joined as a theatre tech. He's now been working with us for the last 4 years. And I tell you, he's one of our most hardworking techs. And the joy he brings to work is just infectious. So also with Kerin, this young woman who also grew up in Alice Springs and now part of a team, that is such a joy having them around us. There is such value in having this diverse representation in our workforce because it reflects the society in which we live and work in currently. It is invaluable. When we have Aboriginal patients who come into the operating theatre and they see someone like Robert, who's part of a highly functioning team that is looking after them and taking care of them and keeping them safe, they feel a sense of safety. They feel a sense of pride and they feel a sense of inspiration, knowing that they can tell their children, look, we saw Robert and he is working in a theatre with other people and he's doing so well. Why can't you? We're hoping that will inspire more people. And Robert is doing that. He's talking to his family and telling them about the joys of having to come to work and working with other people. It is also great learning from us, for us. So Robert teaches us a lot of things about culture. And so when we have patients coming in and we're not sure how to deal with certain aspects of it, we ask him and he willingly, gladly teaches us. And so it has been such an incredible opportunity for us, not only for us to learn, but also for our patients who come in also to feel supported and secure in that environment, which can be quite daunting, of course. Go to the next slide, please. We can be advocates for the disadvantaged and the underrepresented. We can be advocates for people like that to be part of our training programs and part of our workplaces. So the Alice Springs Hospital is part of the ANZCA training program. We were part of the South Australia Northern Territory Anaesthesia training scheme. But the Alice Springs Hospital, excuse me, was an elective. You could choose to come to Alice. And over the last few years, we found that we weren't getting any candidates choosing to come to Alice. A lot of them went to Darwin, but not to Alice. So we decided to pursue this path of becoming an independent, so being able to take independent trainees. We were accredited initially for 1 year. Now we are accredited for 2 years. The Darwin Hospital is accredited for 2 years. What we are currently considering is an NT-centered anesthesia training scheme, where majority of the anesthesia training can occur within the Northern Territory. Hopefully, this is going to attract people who have lived and grown up in the NT, not having to go away to faraway places to do their training, but it will encourage them to stay within the NT. And hopefully that will increase our potential to attract these future consultants who come from an Indigenous background, excuse me, and who will potentially be part of our workforce into the future. I know that our colleges are doing more and more now to address gender disparity and underrepresentation of Indigenous trainees. How can we do better? I think that we need to think about how we consider doing this with out of the box. How we can't do what we've done all these years because it just still haven't got the representation we require. So I'm hoping that this has given you a bit of food for thought. It is an honor for me to be able to present at the International Women's Day, even though I'm not a woman, but thank you for allowing me this opportunity, and I hope that together we will continue to be our strong advocates for those who need to be represented in our colleges and our workplaces. Thank you.
Jacob, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I think you've shown yourself to be a true ally and how you can do well at allyship and speak up for those who may not be confident speaking up for themselves. So I really appreciate it. Your mention of affirmative action, it's a word that often is very polarizing, but I love that you presented that it's the goal of equity is not that one person's gain is another person's loss. It's actually to raise the whole standard for everybody across the board, and that we shouldn't feel threatened about raising up people who simply don't have our privileges, because actually it will help us and make us all a better team. And that was just a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To our third speaker, last certainly not least, we're very lucky to have Professor Rebecca Grainger, a distinguished academic rheumatologist at the University of Otago in Wellington. She has a demonstrated commitment to patient-centred care and medical education. Since joining the University of Otago in 2009, Professor Grainger has taught at the Otago Medical School in the medical degree and postgraduate programs for allied health professionals. Her research activities involve arthritis, digital health and technology in health professions. Professor Grainger continues to combine clinical practice at the hospital with her academic responsibilities, striving to enhance healthcare outcomes and champion equity within the medical community. So presenting on behalf of RACP, what I'm sure we all need at this time, how to have the resilience to keep on marching.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I feel very humbled because I feel quite lucky to be able to do work that I believe is meaningful and important. And I'd echo things our colleague, Dr. Koshy, talked about the meaning that we can derive from work. So I've been asked to talk about the resilience to keep marching. I noticed that Associate Professor Fielding talked about the work that RACS is committed to doing in increasing the number of women in training positions, in leadership positions, and also decreasing the barriers for women and others to take those up. Dr. Koshy talked about the gaps that are unfortunately faced in health outcomes for Aboriginal people, and I'd like to mention that those similar gaps are found in Māori in New Zealand and our Pacific peoples. And I was also interested to hear Dr. Koshy talking about affirmative action and the impact that has had in his original country of India, and steps for affirmative action and the hopes he has for it in his adopted home of Central Australia. It could be easy to feel a little bit tired at this point or a bit apprehensive about the work that needs to be done. And it occurs to me that no one's going to come and do it for us, and we are going to have to do it ourselves. So we will need resilience to keep marching with this work. So there are probably two types of resilience I'd like to mention at this point, which first of all is personal resilience. And this can be defined as the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences through mental, emotional, and behavioural flexibility and adjustments to meet external and internal demands. I think the first thing I'd like to point out about resilience is it occurs and is developed and growing when things are tough. So those difficult situations are actually growing us. Some of the elements of developing personal resilience include emotional regulation, the ability to notice what is going on and respond to it in a way that is good for you and good for those around you. An ability to remain optimistic when the external circumstances may not suggest that there's intrinsic reasons to be optimistic. The ability to be adaptable. Our world, the degree to which our world changes around us and the unpredictability appears to be increasing, and we need to be able to adapt to current circumstances. And a final and very important part of personal resilience relates to self-care. And that's really prioritising physical and mental well-being through activities like exercise, hobbies and relaxation. And big up to Dr. Koshy for his badminton, which I think will hit both the physical activity, the hobby, and the other important thing, which is connecting with other people. Oh, hang on a second. There we go. I care for myself every day I come to my main workplace. I searched through my photo file on my phone and found just a few of the photos that I stop and take as I walk to work. I have to get to work anyway. Walking is just about as quick as driving. The weather's not always this good, but on the days that it is, it certainly nurtures my soul. So I wanted to include this just to remind us all that we don't have to carve off time that we don't necessarily have. There are simple ways we can put small acts of self-care into our everyday lives. And I am all the better for walking to work and changing to look work ready when I get here. So I encourage you all to think about ways that you can encourage small aspects of self-care into your daily lives to increase your personal resilience. Most of us are in paid employment, and we need also to have resilience in our professional lives. And this relates back to the same ideas about the capacity to handle workplace-related stress, challenges and setbacks, while also maintaining our performance and our well-being at work. As doctors, we have a particular responsibility to maintain our performance because it directly can relate to our patient outcomes. It's really important to maintain our well-being at work because most of us won't survive if we don't work in teams, and we need to be well individually for our teams to be able to be well. The factors that can play into professional resilience have some similarities with those for personal resilience, with a few differences. We need to have really good problem-solving skills. We need to be able to identify what's going on and address it in an appropriate way. We do need to continuously learn, and that's not just knowledge about our medical disciplines, but it's actually knowledge about how teams work, about leadership, whether that be self-leadership or named leadership roles, and continuing to learn about how organisations work and how they can thrive. We do need support systems, both formal and informal, in terms of building networks that can support us across our workplaces. And then there's this idea of work-life balance. And I prefer, rather than thinking about that as time-based, as thinking about managing our energy and managing our time well. Most of us won't have balance as it would be recognised by people outside healthcare, but it is important to have a good framework for how we ensure that what we're doing is increasing our energy or maintaining current energy rather than decreasing it. I personally get a lot of energy, positive energy from working, and my work week wouldn't be the one that other people might like, but it suits me and I know what I need to do to be able to maintain it. So we each need to understand ourselves, our unique context, and be sure that we're nurturing ourselves and managing our time and energy and our personal commitments outside the workplace. Now, if you are on this webinar, you are probably a medical student or more likely a resident doctor or a senior doctor. And if you are here, you are probably already really more resilient than you know, and you are probably bloody brilliant. So I just want us all to remember what we've already done and where we've already been, and that we are already have a lot of skills to navigate. But there's always an opportunity to continue to develop our resilience, and I'm going to focus now on professional resilience. I've already said, but it's so important, I'd like to say it again. The capacity to tolerate stress and challenge is growing when we face stress and challenge. So over time and with experiences, our resilience grows. It may not feel very nice, but you come out the other side with more capacity to be resilient in the future. And when I think back across my career, what was hard before is not so hard anymore, and we're nearly always at the edge of our ability. So it is important that we're all sort of aware of our rev limit, that idea in a car that there's a kind of a limit it can get up to, and beyond that it's going to be dangerous. And we do need to know how we can look after ourselves at that time. It's okay to say no. I actually said no to giving this talk originally, but I backtracked and decided I did have the capacity to do it. And I knew what to do to make it possible for me to talk today. We should always be ready to ask for help. I am hard pressed to think of a time that I've asked a colleague, senior or junior, for help, or an organisation or a professional body, and they have not helped, whether that be in a professional matter or a personal matter. Humans are inherently kind and will try and help if they can. So please ask for help. There are lots of places you can ask for help, whether that be your peers, in your workplace, your wider teams, and that doesn't have to be doctors. Our nursing, technical and managerial colleagues are all sources of support or help in the workplace. Our medical colleges are ready and waiting to find ways that they can help us. Sometimes there are challenges to be navigated that we have to work through together, but I have the firm belief, after serving in more college committees and roles than I care to mention, that our colleges really do want to help. We almost all belong to other professional organisations related to our particular disciplines, and they're a source of either finding peers to help or more formal mentoring programs. I'd echo what the principal at our son's school said about their students. There's no problem for a 14-year-old boy that can't be solved. And the parallel is there's probably no problem facing a doctor that some other doctor or organisation hasn't faced before. We just need to surface it and ask for help. And I would like to also remind you that doctors are people too, and sometimes people need professional help, whether that be coaches or psychological help from trained psychologists. And I'm quite happy to tell you that on occasions I have engaged leadership coaches to help me in my named leadership roles. And I took a rather unusual step, actually just about 2 years ago, exactly when my father was dying, that I realised that that could be a significant insult to my sense of self and ability to be resilient. And I booked time with a psychologist to proactively manage that difficult challenge in my life. And I'm sharing that simply so that people listening know that it's okay for any of us to ask for help if we think we're going to need it. And that was a very positive experience for me. This is by no means an advertisement, but I'd like to mention that there are sometimes unexpected places to get help. New Zealand women health professionals are quite lucky because about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a grassroots organisation set up called Wahine Connect. Wahine means woman in Te Reo. And this is a New Zealand-wide online mentorship program that matches mentees with mentors. And it has been a great help to many New Zealand doctors and health professionals. And we hope to have some data in the public domain soon about the challenges faced and how successful this program has been. So there are help in unusual or unexpected places too. I just want to circle back to the idea of affirmative action and also to some of the problems that Associate Professor Fielding pointed out about the structural barriers to success for everyone in our workplaces. There is a lot of work to be done, and we cannot be complacent. We have to speak up and ask for the things that women and other marginalised groups need and deserve. And I would challenge everyone to be bold and act together for some of the structural barriers which have not yet been addressed around flexible work, around accommodating different needs in the workplace. So the struggle is not over, and we're better together. So we do need to address those. And finally, one thing when you're asking for help, I know I was often reluctant to ask for help because I felt like I could be a burden on others. And I'm just going to share a very small personal story about asking for help and actually being a mentor or a senior colleague helping a more junior can be a very joyful and personally rewarding experience. This is a photo of me with a young woman called Hermilie, who I initially met 10 years ago when she was a medical student, and she did some paid research with me actually during her medical studies. I was fortunate enough to be at her graduation in another capacity and was really proud to be with her as she graduated. She has since gone into physician training, and I have continued to support her from a distance in a mentoring capacity. And about a month ago, because over the 10 years I've known her, we've become friends, and this is at Hermilie's wedding about a month ago. And of course, you don't really want a picture of me, you want a picture of the happy couple. So that's just a small story to explain how personally meaningful mentorship relationships can be. This, of course, is a particularly strong mentoring relationship, but I have got more back from this than I have given, and many mentors will stay the same. And who doesn't like going to a wedding? So finally, I'd like my final message is everyone on this webinar today and watching, you are all resilient. We are all resilient already. There is a lot of work to be done, but we can keep marching together, and together is so much better when we develop and nurture mutually supportive relationships that we both gain from.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor Grainger. I am so grateful that we got you to say yes in the end, because that was wonderful. I'm eternally guilty of disliking the word resilience and feeling like it's a hospital system way of making system problems individual problems. But I love that you start with the baseline acknowledging that we are actually inherently resilient just in our ability to have gotten to the point of being a doctor. So thank you so much for celebrating that and for bringing that to the fore. For everybody who's attending, you'll be grateful to know that this webinar does in fact attract you some excellent CPD points. People from ANZCA know that these are the good ones to get, the cultural safety points. And if afterwards you complete a critical reflection, you can get practice evaluation points too. And thank you to the other colleges for also endorsing this for college CPD points. I do think we have time to get everyone to answer my final question. I might go in the reverse order of our speakers, so starting with Prof. Grainger, Dr. Koshy, and then Associate Professor Fielding. I've got one question. So would you encourage a school leader to march forward or embark in a career in medicine in 2025? And would their gender matter in the answer to that question?
I think the short answer is yes, and yes and no. So I think medicine has such a variety of career opportunities at the other end that there is something for everyone. You do need to go in with your eyes wide open with an interest and a capacity for hard work. I think a service ethic is essential, because if you are willing to serve, your cup will be filled by the hard work that we all do. Does gender matter? Yes, it does, because we all bring our whole selves, and there are some responsibilities that some genders carry that others don't. But I think it matters. I don't think it has to be a barrier. And I would ask everyone in positions of leadership and influence to be constantly aware or checking themselves for bias and addressing it where possible, and stepping up and standing up for people who are differently abled, differently gendered, because we are better if the diversity is together. Go for it. I mean, medicine's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to touch on bias there. There's an unconscious bias toolkit that everyone can access via our link. It's a really wonderful thing. If you've not tested your unconscious biases and you're sitting on an interview panel, then you're potentially not giving your fairness and equity to the people you're interviewing. Dr. Koshy.
Sure. I absolutely echo what Professor Grainger just said, and I think that medicine is an absolutely wonderful profession, and there is no reason why someone who's coming as a young girl wanting to do medicine, that you would not have any opportunities now to do well in medicine. I believe that this is where we are reaching a point in our system where people are recognizing that there is such power in empowering people from other genders to succeed, and that we may have to make little adjustments in our workplaces, but we are more aware that by making those little adjustments, we are creating opportunities to get really highly functioning people within our departments. And I speak from my experience with a few people that we've dealt with over the past few years, where we've had to adjust things, and we initially thought this wouldn't work, but it has actually worked wonderfully. One young woman who had come from a significantly traumatic event, having worked in the emergency department, came to our department and wanted us to take her off the clinical roster because of what she had experienced and seen. And we thought, how will this work now with this particular person? But we found a way to use her in other areas of our department, which turned out to be incredibly rewarding for us. So like that, there are ways that we can be innovative in how we deal with people coming through. And I think we are beginning to see a wave of people more willing to accept that we don't have to do things the way we've always done it. So yes, if someone's thinking of coming into medicine now, yes, because we are reaching a point where people are much more aware of the possibilities, and you will be well supported in coming into medicine.
Thank you so much. And rounding us off, Associate Professor Fielding.
Thanks, Claire. Look, absolutely, I would be encouraging school leavers, and we do that at my medical school. Our medical students, as part of their professional skills curriculum, go out to schools and teach young, grade 11 and 12s and 10s all about a medical career. And I think that's a really good time to get them, particularly with my rural hat on. We know that rural people are much more likely to stay in rural if they train in rural, and we have a regional training hub in Whare. And so we're very keen to get them involved. So, and does gender matter? Look, it does matter, because we actually know that we need to have a population of doctors that look like the population that we serve. So we need to have women and diverse populations, different races. We have 8% Indigenous people in rural New South Wales, and particularly in Wagga. So we need Indigenous doctors. We have a very multicultural town now. Wagga's the most multicultural rural town in Australia, I believe. And so it's really important that we also engage our refugee population and our multicultural groups. So yeah, I absolutely believe that gender matters. It's hard. So it's really important for our role models, for all of us here today, and all of the people that we work with to support these young people coming through. So absolutely, I think it's a must. We have to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our speakers for generously giving their time. Thank you to the 3 colleges for all of the support. They have all worked tirelessly to make today run smoothly and do all the tech and the presentations. So we're really grateful, especially the teams at ANZCA, RACS and RACP. There will be a link for this recording. It'll be sent out in the coming week with any other resources mentioned in the webinar. And we really welcome ongoing discussions and feedback across the colleges about this, because it's going to be an ongoing conversation for generations to come. So thank you so much, and let's march forward together.